For the record, my name is William Scretany, and I am a federal district judge here in Buffalo. And for us, today is a glorious, glorious day as we honor one of our own, Robert H. Jackson, a successful trial attorney, the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg, a renowned statesman, and a distinguished jurist. It is my privilege, on behalf of the judges and the entire federal court staff, most of whom are in the back, to preside at this ceremony to name this courthouse in honor of Robert H. Jackson, Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court between 1941 and 1954. I want to begin by apologizing to those of you that had to rearrange plans from the original August 22nd date, which was postponed due to President Obama's last-minute visit to our region. But I assure you that we fully intend to go forward today, no matter who shows up. Regrettably, though, we must do so without two of our staunchest supporters, Senator Charles Schumer and Congressman Brian Higgins. Each of them intended to be here, but they are now either on their way or in Washington to tackle the weighty work of the budget crisis. As you will hear from our speakers, Senator Schumer and Congressman Higgins not only were instrumental in the funding of the courthouse, but also they spearheaded the effort to name it after Robert H. Jackson. Although their presence is sorely missed, we in Western New York are fortunate to have politicians of their caliber devoting their considerable talents and expertise to the fiscal challenge in Washington, which is central not only to the sound management of this great nation, but also to the fair administration of justice in our federal court system. Maybe in their absence, we could acknowledge them with a round of applause. For those of you that don't know, and if you kind of wander a little bit as the program progresses, if you want to read the 4,543 words of the United States Constitution from the inside out, all right, they're on our pavilion front wall right here this morning. We're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by four of our very finest court security officers, whom we all rely on every day: judges, staff, jurors, and the public alike, for protection and security and assistance. Timothy Buckley, Brian Finley, Darrell Harris, and Chris Mazie. They have come forward. Please rise and join us. Gentlemen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Gentlemen, thank you. All right, if everybody would remain standing before you sit. All right. It is my pleasure to introduce and invite Cassina Frazier of True Bethel Baptist Church up to the podium to lead us in singing the national anthem. Cassina, if you would, please. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, are you in good voice?
I'm feeling a little under the weather, but I'm here.
Okay. Would you start for us, please?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air,
Thank you, Kalina. The acoustics in the pavilion has never been finer. Thank you so much. Your rendition was not only beautiful, but it was inspiring. Thank you very, very much on behalf of the entire court and our Western New York community. Okay, now that you're seated, be comfortable, and I'm going to invite for our invocation Rabbi Perry Netter of Temple Beth Zedek. Rabbi, if you would step up, please.
And now that you're all comfortable, I'm going to ask you to rise once again, please. We dedicate this building today with prayerful hearts full of hope that this building will be a beacon of light to dispel the darkness of malice and enmity. Mindful as we are that a civilization not founded on justice will collapse from the weight of its own internal decay, we pray. We pray that the deliberations that take place within the walls of this courthouse will be infused with the spirit of truth and fairness, and we pray that this court will never know deceit or guile. May the judgments rendered here favor neither wealth nor poverty. May they esteem neither strength nor weakness. May they reverence neither ideology nor creed, but only be informed by strict justice, tempered with mercy. We invoke all of God's blessings on this house of justice and pray the words of the author of Psalm 90. May the favor of the Lord our God be upon us. Let the work of our hands prosper. Oh, prosper the work of our hands. May this be God's will, as we all say, amen. Now you may be seated.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Netter. Your words are not only moving, but they are cause for pause and reflection. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I would now like to introduce, ladies and gentlemen, a familiar face to all of you, my friend and very distinguished colleague, Judge Richard J. Cara, who will deliver our welcoming remarks this morning. Judge Cara.
Wow. Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Cara, and I have the distinct privilege of welcoming all of you and introducing some of our distinguished guests and members of the court. I want to start out by saying that those of you that live in a cave and not aware of it, the Buffalo Bills won yesterday, 23-20 over the Baltimore Ravens. I actually had someone ask me that this morning, Karen. Now you know. On behalf of the District Court for the Western District of New York, I want to warmly welcome all of you to our new courthouse and the ceremony to name it after United States Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson. As we approach the 100-year anniversary of Robert Jackson's admission to the New York Bar, there is no more fitting a time to name this building and no more fitting a man to name it after. Unfortunately, Senator Schumer and Congressman Higgins, as Judge Scrutiny has indicated, are not here today because they were certainly two stalwarts in our congressional delegation who not only ensured the completion of this courthouse, but also ensured that it be named after Justice Jackson, the preeminent legal scholar and thinker of his time. We also have with us today representatives of Senator Hildebrand, also Congressman Collins' office, and we thank them for their continuing support for the federal judiciary. At this time, I want to extend a special welcome to our new Chief Circuit Judge for the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, Chief Judge Robert Katzman, who's sitting right here. and Justice Richard Wesley, who's sitting right over there. Please be nice to these two gentlemen. They are my boss, and I have to be very nice to them for various obvious reasons. We also have with us today Circuit Executive Karen Milton. Karen, who was very helpful in reaching this goal of this courthouse. From time to time, obviously, it was a difficult road, and she helped us tremendously. Without her help, I'm not so sure this building would have been built. I also want to thank a very good friend of mine, Judge Scretany, the Chief Judge of the Southern District of New York, Loretta Preska. Loretta, terrific. If there's a more dynamic Chief Judge, I don't know where that person is. I had the pleasure of visiting with her about 2 months ago, and it was a wonderful occasion, and you really helped us out a lot, Loretta. We really thank you. I also want to introduce Denise Pierce, the General Service Administrator. Denise, they all traveled to be here today. Also, we have, I believe, our former Congressman John LaFalce and Kathleen Hochul. I think they're here somewhere. And our former ambassador to Malta, my dear friend, Anthony Gioia. Where are you sitting, Anthony? And a former magistrate judge, Carol Heckman, and our good friend, Mayor Brian Brown, who's here today, who just came off a tremendous success. I also like to recognize a man who's, I guess, my whole career has revolved around since the first time I became an assistant United States attorney back at the time of Moses. Senior Judge John Curtin, who's here. We also have with us today Chief Judge Carl Buckeye from the Bankruptcy Court, Judge Kaplan, and Judge Paul Warren. They're also here. Thank you very much for being here. And also our magistrate judges, Scott, Schrader, McCarthy, Fascio. Thank you very much for being here. Is Elizabeth Wolford here? Elizabeth, would you please stand? This is going to be the next district court judge for the Western District of New York. I don't want to put a jinx on this, but it's so nice that you came here today, and we can't wait for you to come. The judges are waiting for you. We have the cases all lined up for you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. As all the judges here, the process of becoming a district court judge is not a simple one. So we know what you've gone through, Catherine and Elizabeth, and I'm sure happy for you, and we look forward to seeing you. We also have with us this morning the U.S. Attorney, Bill Hochul. Bill, where are you? We have our distinguished federal public defender, Marianne Mariano. Where are you, Marianne? Here somewhere? There you go. Our U.S. Marshal, Charles Salina. Charles, where are you? He's providing all the security for this beautiful and important event. And Holly Hubert, where's Holly? The special agent in charge of the FBI, I believe. She's here? Well, maybe she's not here. We'd also like to, pleased to have members of the local community here. We have Dean Matua from the Dean of the UB Law School. I believe he's here somewhere. Okay. We have Michael Ryan, the Erie County President of the Erie County Bar. Michael. Stephen Medica from the Monroe County Bar. I believe he's Steve. Terrific. We have Thomas O'Donnell, the Niagara County Bar President. Is he here? Okay. Is there anyone I missed? If anyone would like to be in, who did I miss? I'm sorry. Former Congressman Hoko, I'm sorry. Would you please stand up? I'm sorry. Finally, we are thrilled to have with us the members of the Justice Jackson family, his granddaughter, Julia Craighill, who will be speaking to all of us shortly, and members of the Jackson Center in Jamestown, New York. Professor John Barrett, this man has spent so much time, probably knows more about Justice Jackson than anyone else. And he's worked very hard in the scholarly work that he's done for Justice Jackson, and certainly had an impact on bringing to light the great accomplishments of Justice Jackson. And also the co-founder of the Jackson is Greg Peterson. Greg, where are you? We'll be hearing from Professor Barrett shortly. Now, the federal courthouses are often named for other deserving individuals, members of Congress, war heroes, or fallen law enforcement officials. The Dillon Courthouse across the street, for example, was named after Michael Dillon, an IRS agent named in the line of duty. Taking nothing away from such worthy individuals, it is particularly special that this courthouse is named after a justice of the Supreme Court. Justice Jackson was a self-starting attorney, a fierce prosecutor, a distinguished jurist, and a gifted writer and scholar. And it's particularly fitting that when you consider that when he was a young attorney, he practiced law here in Buffalo. He routinely walked across this very parcel of land to go from his home to his office. For those fleeting footsteps to the permanent honor, Justice Robert Jackson's legacy lives on where it first began, here in Western New York, and that we are extremely proud of. Again, well, you are all welcome. We're so glad that all of you came here today to participate in this very special and honorable occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Arcaro. Actually, that was twice as long as Judge Arcaro's allotted time, but he thought he could take that liberty because Senator Schumer and Congressman Higgins were not here to speak this morning. Actually, history's in the making for our district. Judge Wolford, soon to be, when she takes the bench, will be the first woman federal district court judge in the Western District of New York. So we're looking forward to that. There's also a bit of history that we're making. Judge Preska entrusted me with getting her a robe to wear for today's ceremony. I learned that there is no difference between a male and a female robe. I told her that the reason I didn't have one ready was because I thought hers should be tailored. She disagreed with that, so she is now wearing the only other robe that we could scrounge up in the entire building. So Judge Preska, thank you. All right. Also, I think Paula Ferraletto, Judge Ferraletto, are you here? There you are. I want to introduce her. She's our Chief Administrative Judge for the department here in the Western New York area on the state side. Please welcome Judge Ferraletto. Okay, we're now going to hear from the judge that you heard Judge Arcaro reference, and that's Chief Judge for the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, Robert A. Katzman. Judge Katzman became Chief Judge on September 1st of this year. We are honored that he took the time to come to Buffalo from New York City to celebrate with us this morning. The breadth of his experience and his impeccable pedigree position him exceptionally well to deal with the inevitable challenges of the third branch of our government in the upcoming years. We judges not only here in the Western District, but in the circuit. Look forward to his leadership and his successful tenure as Chief Judge. Judge Katzman, please welcome.
Thank you, Chief Judge Scretany, who is my partner on the Judicial Conference, and I'm so thrilled to have him as my teammate in Washington as we seek to preserve what's best for the Second Circuit and the district courts throughout the circuit. I thank also Judge Cara, who insists that he will not ever call me by my first name, so I have to call him Judge. I really like him to call me Richard. I'd like to call him Richard so he'd call me Bob. Anyway, good morning to everybody here. Good morning to Mayor Brown, Judge Wesley, Chief Judge Preska, the judges of the Western District of New York, Judge Designee Walford. We hope Judge Walford very soon. Administrator Pease, Professor John Barrett, Dean Matua, Ambassador Joya, the Jackson family, court executives and staff, colleagues and friends, and all those I've not mentioned who Judge Cara had the grace to mention. Now, this is my first courthouse naming ceremony since becoming Chief Judge of the Second Circuit, and I just wouldn't miss it. It's just an honor to be here at this in this spectacular courthouse. We celebrate, as Chief Judge Scretany and Judge Cara have noted, the naming of this courthouse for Associate Justice Robert Jackson, who was, from my perspective, the epitome of the lawyer's lawyer, whose writings were of uncommon power, who worked for the common good in a lifetime of distinguished service. And we in the Second Circuit are proud to claim him as one of our own. Indeed, as a Supreme Court Justice, he was once asked what he coveted about his assignment, and he used the word covet. He said, "I covet the assignment of being a circuit justice, for it made," and he said, and I quote, "de jure what in any event has been a de facto situation, and that is that I more or less represent the New York Bar to the court and the Supreme Court to the New York Bar." I lifted that from the for Professor Barrett's page in which he quoted and had the speeches of Justice Jackson, and that was a speech that he gave to the New York State Bar Association at the Waldorf Astoria in 1942. At the dedication of the courthouse last year, Senator Schumer and Congressman Higgins, without whose tireless efforts this courthouse would not have been built, told us that they and Senator Gillibrand had introduced legislation in both houses of Congress to name this new courthouse for Justice Jackson. As Chief Judge Scretany and Judge Cara noted, we are so grateful to our members of Congress, to Senator Schumer, to Congressman Higgins, also to Senator Gillibrand for their support, because we know that without their support and hard work, we would not be in this courthouse today, and we would not be naming it for Justice Jackson. And I might add that I can't help, in absentia, with respect to Senator Schumer, noting that Justice Jackson, as Circuit Justice, would no doubt have been so proud of the quality of the New York bench, a bench that's second to none, which owes so much to Senator Schumer in recent years, who's been the guardian of excellence in advancing supremely qualified individuals to serve in our courts. Great buildings, as this courthouse is, deserve to be named for great people. And so it is that this striking structure, which is the embodiment of justice, is named for a giant in the law, a lawyer practiced in the Western District, Robert H. Jackson. The late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who had a special affection for Buffalo, and I well recall his talking about his efforts to restore the Prudential building of of Louis Sullivan, stressed the importance of incorporating the poetry of design into our civic structures. He said, as nowhere else on earth, the courthouse is a symbol of government in the United States. The courthouse square is where folks gather. Senator Moynihan would be pleased with the Jackson Courthouse because it is one with the important work that will be conducted within its walls. The Jackson Courthouse amply expresses the dignity of the federal judiciary while simultaneously underscoring the transparency of our nation's justice systems, reflected by the etching of all 4,536 words of the United States Constitution on the glass, as Chief Judge Scretany noted earlier, on the glass facade, casting a silhouette on all who enter this courthouse. The Jackson Courthouse, this courthouse, welcomes all who will walk through its doors, traverse its hallways, and enter its courtrooms to conduct the business of the day. It welcomes all, no matter their circumstance, who look to the judiciary for the peaceful resolution of disputes, the litigants seeking justice, the prosecutors hoping to make malefactors pay for their ill deeds, the public defenders who ensure an effective adversarial system, the witnesses, the jurors, the immigrants who become new citizens in this building and for whom this building has special meaning, the court staff, the judges, the probation officers, the marshals and security officers who keep us safe, the court reporters and interpreters, the GSA building staff, the public who sit in on any of the 9 courtrooms and observe the dispensation of justice in this great building named for a great son of New York. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this auspicious occasion. I look forward to many more visits in the Western District and the Jackson Courthouse during my tenure as Chief Circuit Judge.
Thank you very much, Chief Judge Katzmann. We are very, very pleased to have this opportunity to host you at your first official naming ceremony of a new courthouse, and we're glad it's the Robert H. Jackson Courthouse. Thank you so much for being with us. If I may, I'd like to take this opportunity to let you know that I look forward very much to partnering and working with you on the upcoming work related to the Judicial Conference. So one more time for our Chief Judge. We are going to take one of our speakers out of order. Before I announce who she is, Denise Pease, I won't give that away. I just want you to please, those of you that are seated here as our guests for this naming ceremony, to acknowledge with a round of applause the staff of the federal courthouse, from probation to the marshal service to the clerk's office to our court chamber staff. They make this run. They know what it means to contribute to the full and fair administration of justice. They're here today in full force. Some of them are still working upstairs, I think, but they deserve a round of applause, if you would. All right, just as Congressman Higgins and Senator Schumer and Senator Gillibrand and Congressman Collins were summoned to Washington today, Denise Pease, who is the regional administrator for Region 2, came in this morning and she was somewhat somber, and she said, you know, I can't stay for as long as I would have liked to. I do have a call from Washington to come to Washington early this afternoon to do my duty with respect to representing Region 2 and working with those individuals who are involved with the budget crisis in DC. So she needs to, I think, be taken out of the sequence that we had planned. She has just been, I mean, an incredible friend, a wonderful partner of the federal court here in the Western District. throughout the process of the funding and the construction and the building of this particular building. Likewise, with respect to having it named after Robert H. Jackson, we want her to know that we appreciate her and value her continuing support very much. Denise Pease.
Thank you very much, Judge Scretny and Judge Cara, and of course, Chief Judge Katzman, members of the judiciary, and to the Jackson family, thank you for accommodating this slight scheduling change. I wouldn't have missed today for anything, because this court is very, very important, not just to GSA, because this shows the three branches of government working together. The judiciary, of course, who supports this project and who lives in this building, the legislative branch, who appropriates the money and works to support the money, and GSA, who builds the building, the executive branch. But you know, it's always a pleasure to join with you today, but it was particularly important for me to be here today to the Jackson family, because on a personal note, I don't think I would be standing here today if it were not for the Brown versus Board of Education decision of 1954. I was born in 1953, and our country was in a very different state. And I think if I wouldn't have had the opportunity for a quality education, I wouldn't have been at Columbia, I wouldn't have gone to some of the schools of higher education to go to Europe to school, but those opportunities, so thank you and thank your family for sharing Justice Jackson with so many people. So thank you very, very much. I know that Mayor Brown and so many African Americans share with me in that very historic decision that next year we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of, in rendering that decision, because so many social issues affect the way we govern our country, and that some of the decisions that the court has impartially made on behalf of our great country. But you know, the Jackson Courthouse, with its transparent, with our Constitution on its walls, shows the transparency of our government. And I think that's very important for the world to see. And here in Western New York, that borders on another country, you know, everyone can see that our country is resilient, strong, and very transparent. Well, when GSA was established in now I have to go to the prepared remarks. When GSA was established in 1949, we became a custodian of many beautiful and historic buildings that helped shape the landscape of our communities across the nation. We hold these buildings in trust for the American people. And today, GSA's Design Excellence Programs continues to ensure that public buildings that we build complement and enhance our legacy buildings, and we meet our priorities to serve the needs of our client agencies like the courts. Certainly, this striking building, which completes Niagara Square, adds to the landscape of downtown Buffalo. But these buildings are not only beautiful to look at. Another GSA priority is to help to deliver a more sustainable government for the American people. And we do this in many ways in both our existing building as well as in our new construction like this building. We are proud, of course, of this courthouse that achieved a LEED Gold rating, and it's our first LEED Gold rating courthouse, so I'm very proud of that. This leadership in energy and environmental design certification recognizes the significance of sustainable and energy significant aspects of a new courthouse. And of course, when our buildings are more efficient, they use less energy and save taxpayer dollars. So today, GSA is exploring new directions and new ways to use our federal space more efficiently and more sustainably. And this courthouse is a prime example of how we do that. So of course, You know, while this building is so very important, we will continue to ensure all of our historic buildings, like the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse in New York City, I had to mention that, Karen, and our beautiful new courthouse, the Robert Jackson Courthouse, the United States Courthouse, are well maintained and able to continue to service our client agencies and the American people. Thank you very much, and I apologize for having to leave.
Thank you very much, Denise, and we will miss you for the rest of the day. At this time, our next speaker is Professor John Hugh Barrett of St. John's University Law School in New York City. And clearly, he is the foremost expert on the life of Justice Jackson. A graduate of Georgetown University and Harvard Law School, Professor Barrett is Elizabeth S. Lena Fellow and a board member at the Robert H. Jackson Center in Jamestown, New York. He also serves on the Expert Advisory Committee of the International Nuremberg Principals Academy in Nuremberg, Germany. We are pleased that he could join us this morning before he has to head back to New York City to teach at the law school this evening. Professor John Barrett. Professor.
Thank you, Chief Judge Scretany, for that introduction. Thank you and congratulations for vision and dedicated efforts to Senators Schumer and Gillibrand, Representative Higgins, Chief Judge Scretany and Judge Cara, Chief Judge Katzmann, Chief Judge Preska, all of their judicial colleagues, Administrator Pease and Mayor Brown, city officials, Buffalo law, business, and civic leaders, and the people, all of the lucky Jackson Land people of the Western District of New York. As has been noted, young Robert H. Jackson's life path ran right through this site. In late 1913, 100 years ago this November, Robert Jackson, age 21, was admitted to the New York State Bar. He began to practice law in Jamestown and throughout the Southern Tier and in Erie County. In 1915, Jackson joined the bar of this court. In the Mayville, New York County courtroom, he met and came to impress greatly a new judge, Charles B. Sears of Buffalo, who was presiding there as a visiting judge. In 1916, Sears arranged for his former partners in the law firm then known as Penny, Killeen, and Nye, located in Buffalo's Ellicott Square building, to meet, recruit, and hire young lawyer Robert Jackson. And so Jackson moved to Buffalo. During 1917 and 1918, he and his wife Irene lived in the Lindhaven apartment building at 49 Johnson Park, just a little bit to our west and a few blocks up South Elmwood Avenue. In those years, Jackson's walk to work along Joseph Ellicott's planned streets of this city, designed and built during the 19th century, past the Buffalo High School, today called Hutchinson Tech, which was built in 1913. Here at Niagara Square, Jackson passed the McKinley Memorial Obelisk, which was dedicated in 1906. And opposite the obelisk, he passed this spot. This all was then unimaginable, except perhaps to young Jackson himself. For 2 years in Buffalo, he tried cases and argued appeals on behalf of the Penny firm's principal client, the International Railway Company. He also began the friendships with Buffalo lawyers and leaders that deepened and lasted for the rest of his life. Then, in late 1918, young Jackson decided to return to Jamestown. The mayor, a Republican, recruited young Democrat Jackson, whom he knew well and admired, to be the city's attorney. I'll add parenthetically that on this day, that bipartisan behavior may be a powerful tale to focus on. More fundamentally, Jackson was convinced, moving to Jamestown, that he could rise higher in the legal profession faster from a base in Jamestown than he could in the large, nationally prominent bar of Buffalo. Of course, he was right. Soon he was arguing cases before the New York Court of Appeals. Its Chief Judge, Benjamin Cardozo, became a Jackson mentor. By the late 1920s, Jackson was a leading lawyer in this region and the president of the bar associations of all of Western New York, including Buffalo and Erie County. A few years later, he chaired the American Bar Association's National House of Delegates. In early 1934, President Franklin Roosevelt nominated, and the Senate confirmed Jackson to his first national government office. And you know the story from there. In March 1938, after Jackson was appointed Solicitor General, he received a congratulatory letter from a George Bailey of Buffalo. He was the retired court reporter of the New York State Supreme Court in this city. In 1917 and 1918, Bailey had been an Ellicott Square building neighbor of Jackson and the Penny Law Firm. In his letter, George Bailey recalled asking new Solicitor General Jackson once why he would give up such a fine berth with the Penny Law Firm to return to the sticks. Bailey recalled that Jackson said then, "It seemed for the best." As it appears, and appears, present tense, Bailey wrote, it was. Or to draw on another, more fictional George Bailey, you know him, the one from Bedford Falls, New York, the one on your television at Christmas time, the one whose story has more than a few Jacksonian dimensions. It's a Wonderful Life. Robert H. Jackson's legacy, his stirring, motivating life, and his major, eloquent, enduring contributions to law, in the U.S. and internationally, gets delivered and grows everywhere, including on the web and in individual minds and lives, and also in physical locations. They include these 10. The Robert H. Jackson Center in Jamestown, Chautauqua Institution, where Jackson learned and taught and recreated throughout his life. School classrooms and libraries from elementary to university, where Jackson is studied. Homes, offices, and social spaces, where that study continues and where its effects are most tangible. People who learn their Jackson get smarter, inspired, and more competent, and their lives are better on the inside and as they conduct themselves for becoming connected with his. The government buildings where he served and where his name and his example and his words are alive, assisting and elevating the performances of his successors. Sixth, courthouses in New York State, from Mayville to federal district courts, to the New York Court of Appeals, to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Jackson litigated in each. Seventh, other state and federal courts throughout the country, including, of course, the Supreme Court of the United States. Jackson is a very vibrant figure in each. Eighth, the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg, Germany, including its courtroom 600, Prosecutor Jackson's 1945-1946 courtroom, which thus became Humanities Courtroom, and is, we can hope, on its way to becoming a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ninth, courts throughout the world, including international courts in The Hague and elsewhere, and local courts, even the most primitive, informal ones, which resemble the rural justice courts of Jackson's young lawyer days. And finally, 10th, now, most fittingly and visibly, this Robert H. Jackson United States Courthouse in the heart of Buffalo. In early summer 1937, Robert Jackson wrote a letter that fits the substance of today's occasion, which is not only Jackson's famous name and his high legacies in law and history, but the central place of the United States District Court in people's lives. In that June 1937, then Assistant Attorney General Jackson wrote to an old friend at the bar, the former Rochester City Attorney, Harold P. Burke. Days earlier, Burke had been appointed a judge of this court, the U.S. District Court for the Western District of New York. Judge Burke went on to serve on this court for 44 years, including 12 as its chief judge. After offering congratulations and best wishes, Robert Jackson added this comment to his friend Harold on the substance of Judge Burke's new position. Quote, "I think there is no post of greater usefulness than that of a district judge. They influenced the lives of 1,000 people, Jackson wrote, while appellate judges are dealing only with 12. In this Jackson courthouse, in this district that was Robert Jackson's formative and lifelong legal and personal home, the judges will, for many, many years, influence lives for the better by administering equal justice under law. How Jacksonian and how apt this courthouse name. Thank you.
As always, Professor Barrett, your remarks are memorable and insightful and inspirational. Thank you very, very much for being here with us today. Well, we're moving our way down the list of speakers, and our next speaker is not a lawyer, nor a professor, as far as I know, but she is a licensed architect and a highly regarded and seasoned expert and pioneer in the green building industry that you've heard a little bit about today. Although I am sure that she has an interest in the architecture of this building, I will hazard a guess that she is much more interested in its name. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Justice Jackson's granddaughter, Julia Craighill. Julia.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to speak on this joyous occasion. Naming this building for my grandfather is a wonderful tribute, and I am particularly honored as an architect to be here speaking on behalf of our family, including my brother Tom Loftus and his wife Phyllis, who are sitting right here. I know that this effort involved a great many people, but I would like to particularly thank Chief Judge Scretny for his gracious invitation and good cheer in arranging this event. Congressman Brian Higgins for introducing the bill, Senators Charles Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, who championed the bill before the Senate, and lastly, those who tirelessly promote the work and legacy of my grandfather, such as Greg Peterson and Jim Johnson of the Robert H. Jackson Center, and John Barrett, as you can see, his biographer and scholar extraordinaire. Thank you very much. So contrary to the speakers that have preceded me, I will attempt to give a glimpse of Robert H. Jackson, the man, apart from his career. I never met my grandfather. He died 3 years before I was born, yet I have a special bond with him that revolves around the tiny hamlet of Spring Creek, Pennsylvania, where he was born and spent his formative years. Spring Creek is pretty much due south of here and just over the border. My grandfather loved Spring Creek and shared that love with his daughter, my mother, Mary Jackson Loftus Craighill. My mother frequently visited Spring Creek in her childhood while she lived in Jamestown, and even after moving to Washington, D.C., she returned every summer throughout her middle and high school years with a friend and their horses to camp in the woods on the side of the hill on the farm where my grandfather grew up. My grandfather would join her for 2 weeks every year, pitch his tent, cook everyone's meals, and go on riding adventures with the girls. My mother would brag that he was the only person she ever knew who could prepare flawless pancakes over an open fire. Spring Creek continued to pull and exert a pull on my mother, so August of 1964 found our family pulling up in 2 laden cars, pitching tents in a freezing rain snow. This is August. It's my first introduction to upstate Pennsylvania and New York, in the woods on the side of the hill, on the very same site where she had camped as a girl. That excursion cemented our relationship with Spring Creek. The next year, we built a cabin nearby, and for over 30 summers until my mother's death, we spent the entire August riding horses borrowed from local farmers, cooking over an open fire, and visiting the special places my mother had shared with her grandfather. And every few years, my dad and I would get up early. He would masterfully create a slow-burning fire, and we would try to recreate those mythical pancakes. Unfortunately, the results were rarely even edible. My mother and my grandfather were kindred spirits, spending long hours riding in the woods together, walking along the stream beds, witnessing the cycles of life and the denizens of the forest. He would always shush his chattering child and impress on her that nature is a place to be observed and respected. He believed that the natural world had a lot to teach us. A sense of responsibility, stewardship, and accommodation of the environment has greatly informed my career and, as Judge Scretny mentioned, become my calling. And lastly, I'm sorry Ms. Pease had to leave, as I would also like to recognize the General Services Administration for the leadership it has shown in demanding design and environmental excellence in its built projects. It is apparent that all of the talented individuals who labored to bring this extraordinary building to fruition accepted that challenge and exceeded it. Moreover, as a LEED Gold certified project, as we have heard, it has the potential to lead the way for Western New York in continued environmental sensitivity and innovation. I, for one, heartily approve, and I like to think my grandfather would also. Thank you very much.
Julia, thank you very much. You certainly did your grandfather, the person, very proud this afternoon. Thank you again for being here with us. Our final speaker, and he really needs no introduction. He is, as you all know, the mayor of the city of Buffalo. Mayor Brown was a strong and unwavering proponent of our courthouse project, and we continue to be very grateful to him for his support, his cooperation, and his accessibility throughout the incredible journey that took place in constructing this courthouse and now in naming this courthouse. Mayor Brown, we are deeply indebted to you. Please join us here on the podium.
Thank you. Judge Scretny, Judge Cara, Judge Katzman, members, judges of the Western District of New York, members of the Jackson family, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It has been noted that I am the last speaker, so I will govern myself accordingly. I want you to know how honored I am to join all of you today for this very historic moment in Buffalo, Western New York, and the United States of America, as this courthouse is formally named for Robert H. Jackson. Almost 2 years ago, I joined many of you to officially open this architectural gem in the heart of downtown Buffalo. And I want to thank Chief Judge Scretny and all of the judges of the Western District for inviting me to speak today. I, in particular, want to recognize Judge Scretny and Judge Cara for their steadfast determination to make sure that this courthouse building was built right here in Buffalo, New York. Let's please give them a round of applause. Certainly they have been recognized, but I again want to recognize the Western New York congressional delegation, and in particular, United States Senator Charles Schumer, United States Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and Congressman Brian Higgins for their tenacious efforts to bring together the resources that make today's naming ceremony possible. In their absence, let's give them another round of applause. And finally, I want to thank and recognize GSA Administrator Denise Pease for her very passionate management of GSA's stewardship of this great building. Let's give Denise another round of applause. The legacy of Justice Robert H. Jackson stretches across time and touches not just those in Western New York and across the country, but also across the ages. From his work as a Buffalo attorney to U.S. Attorney General, to his decision as a U.S. Supreme Court Justice in the landmark Brown versus Board of Education case that ended segregation in public education, Robert Jackson exuded the greatness that this country is known for and this region knows all too well. Just next door, there are statues that represent United States presidents who lived in this region, and less than a mile away, we have the inaugural site of President Theodore Roosevelt. This is a fitting tribute to Justice Robert H. Jackson to name this magnificent symbol of justice in his honor. Thank you all very much.
Thank you again, Mayor Brown. Certainly a true friend of the efforts of our court in having this building and its naming materialize. We appreciate it once again. How's that for timing? We timed this for 1 hour. 1 hour, and we're right on the money, I think. Before we proceed with the two unveilings that are now to follow, I think maybe it would be appropriate to offer one more thank you to all of our speakers. We will now proceed with the unveiling of the bust of Justice Jackson, created by sculptor Dexter Benedict. And joining Judge Cara and me in the unveiling will be Circuit Judge Richard Wesley, Mayor Brown, Ms. Craighill, Greg Peterson, co-founder of the Robert H. Jackson Center, and the sculptor himself, Dexter Benedict. If you would join us up front, please. We're going to have Justice Jackson's granddaughter, Julia Craighill, and Greg Peterson. On cue, on 3, do the unveiling of the bust of Justice Jackson, which will adorn our pavilion lobby after this afternoon. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Okay, before we close our program with the benediction, I want to thank all of you again for joining us for this historic courthouse naming ceremony, particularly those of you that traveled from afar to be here. We really do appreciate that. We judges invite all of you and our staff to stay and share in the reception with us. Because of the budget, it's somewhat more meager than we had hoped for, but of course your presence is what we really look forward to. What we are going to do is adjourn very shortly to the unveiling of the name of Robert H. Jackson in association with this courthouse event. Joining me in the actual unveiling will be Chief Judge Katzman, Judge Cara, Circuit Executive Karen Milton, Don Schubert, and we will get a substitute for Denise Pease in short order on the way out. So those of you that would please and are interested in going out into the patio area outside of our courthouse, we will have the name unveiling there. Before we do that, Father Fuchs, who is the bodyguard, or the former bodyguard, I think, of Justice Jackson at Nuremberg. He will lead us in the benediction, and then we will adjourn outside, and then the reception. Father Fuchs.
Today we have gathered and named this magnificent modern building in honor of Robert H. Jackson. We are here in recognition of his notable legal legacy, and maybe more importantly, his historical and lasting contribution to the rule of law through his leadership in the war crimes trial at the end of World War II in 1945. Justice Jackson embodied so well the national vision and the ideals that have inspired Americans down to our own day, pilgrims and pioneers, farmers and builders, inventors and architects. He took this vision with him on the world stage at Nuremberg in 1945. It was my privilege to have known Justice Jackson as his personal bodyguard 67 years ago as he presided at the historical trials in Nuremberg. In my first-hand observations, I came to value not only the historical opportunity of seeing the war's vindication and justice being done, but also being blessed by getting to know this man as a great American statesman. In his International Military Tribunal role as prosecutor, Mr. Jackson was like the heroic biblical David against Goliath, vanquishing the enormously evil heads of Nazi tyranny. The rule of law and the common sense among humans for decency among all people are insights that are evident in his successful prosecution of the Nazis. We need only turn to the adornments of our own Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. to see the prominent historical figures surrounding Moses as depicted there, presenting the Ten Commandments as being the basis of God's plan for workable relationships among all humans. We ask God today, through the naming of this building in honor of Robert H. Jackson, to help us continue to strive for righteousness, standing up for truth and honor and action against the forces of injustice. Our country, our world, needs to have such affirmation from us today. Let us pray that the activities and efforts deliberated here in this courthouse will always strive to align legalities with justice. Then to that extent, they will be aligned with the intent of the Creator of the whole earth, who has greatly blessed our part of the earth and our times. I ask you to stand now, if you would, please. So let's now turn to God in prayer, to the Creator God of the whole universe, our earth and beyond our planet, to the one whom Jesus pointed out as our Father. Please join me and join, if you can, with those near you, to pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
Thank you very much, Father Fuchs. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the District Court for the Western District of New York and those from the Second Circuit. We thank you for attending. Those of you that would like to join us outside for the unveiling, please do. The others can share in the reception, and we are going to open the courtyard if anybody would like to meander about there. Thank you all very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it gives us great pleasure and it's a great honor to do the unveiling that we've waited so long for. The Robert H. Jackson United States Courthouse. If we would unveil it, please. We didn't practice, this is going to work.